Almost a century later, economists still don't agree on what actually caused the Great Depression. There are some minor disagreements about the details. Genuinely, fundamentally, textbook-contradicting disagreement, from the world's most respected economists, at the world's most respected universities, about the single most studied economic event in modern history. Some blame the stock market itself. Some say the stock market barely mattered. Some blame the banks. Some blame the government for doing too much. Others blame it for doing too little. So today, we're not going to give you the simple textbook answer. We're going to walk through the actual competing theories, and let you decide which one holds up. Let's start with what everyone actually agrees on, because there isn't much. Throughout the 1920s, the American economy appeared to be booming. New technology like radios and automobiles were transforming everyday life. The stock market had been climbing for years, and more ordinary Americans than ever before were buying stocks, many of them borrowing money to do it, a practice known as buying on margin. Then, in October 1929, the market crashed. Prices collapsed over the course of about a week, a period now remembered as Black Thursday and Black Tuesday. Billions of dollars in paper wealth vanished in days. That much, historians agree on. What happened next, how a stock market crash turned into a decade-long global economic depression, with roughly a quarter of Americans out of work at its worst point, is where the agreement completely falls apart. Theory number one is the version most people already know: the crash itself caused the depression. The logic here is straightforward. Millions of Americans had borrowed heavily to buy stocks. When prices crashed, those loans came due, wiping out both the paper wealth and the actual borrowed money. Consumer confidence collapsed. People stopped spending. Businesses, facing falling demand, cut production and laid off workers, which further reduced spending, a self-reinforcing downward spiral. This is the version taught in most high school history classes: clean, simple, and satisfying. But many economists argue it's incomplete, because the U.S. economy had survived stock market crashes before without spiraling into a decade of depression. So what made 1929 different? This brings us to theory number two, the one championed by economists Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz, and later, famously, by former Federal Reserve Chair Ben Bernanke. Their argument: the stock market crash mattered far less than what happened afterward, a catastrophic wave of bank failures. Throughout the early 1930s, thousands of American banks collapsed as panicked depositors rushed to withdraw their savings all at once, a phenomenon known as a bank run. Here's the critical part of this theory: the Federal Reserve, the institution specifically designed to prevent this kind of banking collapse, largely failed to act. Instead of injecting money into the banking system to stop the panic, the Fed allowed the money supply to shrink dramatically. Friedman and Schwartz argued this wasn't an inevitable economic disaster, it was, in large part, a policy failure. A choice, or a series of hesitations, that turned a bad recession into history's worst depression. But not everyone agrees the Federal Reserve is the main villain of this story. Here's where it gets genuinely contentious. Some economists, particularly those following the ideas of Keynesian economics, argue the real problem wasn't monetary policy at all, it was a collapse in overall demand. Businesses had overproduced during the 1920s boom, wages hadn't risen enough to keep up with production, and once spending slowed even slightly, there was already far too much supply chasing too little demand. In this view, the crash was more of a symptom than the root cause. Then there's a completely different theory that focuses on international trade. In 1930, the United States passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, dramatically raising taxes on imported goods to protect American industries. Other countries retaliated with their own tariffs. Global trade collapsed by an enormous margin over the following few years. Some economists argue this international trade war turned what could have been a serious but contained American recession into a genuinely global depression. And more recent research adds yet another layer: the gold standard itself. Many countries at the time tied their currencies directly to gold, which severely limited how much governments could respond to the crisis by adjusting their money supply. Countries that abandoned the gold standard earlier, historians have found, tended to recover from the depression faster than countries that clung to it. So now you have at least 4 serious, well-researched explanations: the stock crash itself, the banking collapse and Fed inaction, a demand-side production imbalance, and a trade war made worse by rigid gold-backed currencies. And most serious historians today would say the honest answer is that it wasn't just one of these, it was several of these forces colliding at the worst possible moment. So here's the uncomfortable truth this leaves us with: the event that shaped nearly a century of economic policy, the event every recession since gets compared to, still doesn't have a single, universally agreed upon cause. And that matters, because the theory you believe in shapes how you think governments should respond to the next crisis. If you believe the Fed caused it through inaction, you want central banks to intervene aggressively. If you believe it was a demand collapse, you want government spending to fill the gap. If you believe it was trade policy, you're wary of tariffs today. So here's my question for you: out of the 4 theories we just covered, which one do you find most convincing? Tell me in the comments, and if you think I left out a theory that deserves more attention, I genuinely want to hear it, because this is one of those topics where the comment section on this channel consistently teaches me something new. If you enjoy digging past the simplified textbook version of history and into the actual, unresolved debates historians are still having, subscribe, because that's genuinely the entire mission of this channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.